Hi, this is Will Lyons. I'm with Oracle, and I'm in product management, responsible for Jakarta EE and WebLogic server. And we thought, I am, as Tanya says, I am also chair of the Jakarta EE Working Group Steering Committee. And we thought it might be interesting and useful to share what the steering committee is planning with respect to not only evolving the Jakarta EE technology, but building the community that develops the technology and promoting the technology in the broader marketplace in order to develop a healthy ecosystem for Jakarta EE. So we thought it would be worth reviewing the process and our plan for 2020 to build a healthy ecosystem for Jakarta EE and the budget that's in place to support that. So that's what I will be discussing. I'm going to start with a little bit of terminology. I'm not sure how familiar many of you are with the term working group. The Eclipse Foundation has the concept of a working group. And working groups are intended to facilitate collaboration around specific Eclipse projects, and they define a governance model and a process and norms for collaboration, for making decisions, for establishing goals, and so on. It's very helpful when you suddenly form a collaborative enterprise to have models for how you get work done in such a mode. And so the Eclipse Foundation Working Group is a model that is used for collaboration around Eclipse projects. And the Jakarta EE Working Group is one such working group. These are the members of the Jakarta EE Working Group. Oracle is my employer, and Payara is a strategic member. And you can see IBM, Fujitsu, Red Hat, and Tommy Tribe are also strategic members. And there's, standards and definitions of what strategic members are. Typically, a strategic member regards the technology as enterprise Java technology, or excuse me, Jakarta EE technology as strategic to their businesses and are investing significant resources. We also have participating members who typically deliver products or services which are based on Jakarta EE technology. So this is our current membership of the Jakarta EE Working Group. As a group, we have defined a charter for what Jakarta EE is intended to accomplish. And this is just a screenshot of the working group charter document, which is available online. And you can see that the working group is intended to, in addition to evolving the technology, promote the brand, provide marketing services, manage a spec process, define compatibility rules, etc. Define licensing for IP flows for the technology that is included in Jakarta EE, manage a technical and business strategy, and fund the essential activities to making the working group function. So, and there's resources committed and funding and budgeting the activities. So we have gone through that process for planning for 2020. The Jakarta EE Working Group budget is aligned with an overall budgeting process that occurs in the Eclipse Foundation. So what we have done, and at a high level, what we've done to create our budget for 2020 is we started by defining some strategic goals and expanded those into more specific objectives and a plan for achieving the goals that were identified. And then we started with a 2020 budget based on known contributions to the working group from the members, from the strategic members and the participant members I described earlier. And then we, in the working group, went through a process of allocating budget to the various proposed activities in order to help achieve those objectives. We have concluded the budgeting process. We have an approved budget that was approved at the Jakarta EE Working Group Steering Committee meeting at the end of November. And this is a collaborative process involving active discussion over several weeks. So I'll describe a little bit of what we defined. First, as I mentioned, we defined some strategic goals. Of critical importance is the next Jakarta EE release, and you just heard from Steve about that. We need to get EE9 out, we know that, and that's a top priority. In addition, we need to establish a roadmap for future releases beyond EE9, so that's an important goal, and we want to be able to have a structured way of answering questions like how many releases will there be a year, what is the likely scope of those releases, what is the release model, etc. We also want to grow the developer community, not only developers who are contributing to the evolution of the technology itself, but developers who are consumers and build applications using the technology. We want to create programs that are helpful to developers. One area of focus, and this is something that Steve alluded to in the Jakarta EE9 plan, is we want to drive a plan for building out tooling support for the technology we're delivering. We want to grow the working group membership. As we engage with more members and vendors who have interests in this area, this helps strengthen the community, and it helps strengthen the funding of the working group, which can drive community success. So that's an important goal for us. And then just very broadly, we want to invest in growing awareness of Jakarta EE technology and the brand itself in the community and build engagement within the community. So these were the high-level strategic goals we discussed within the steering committee, which sets the strategic direction for Jakarta EE. And for each of these strategic goals, we set finer-grained objectives for what we want to achieve and a high-level plan for targeting those objectives in each one of the areas I just mentioned. So I won't read through all the individual slides, but in terms of EE9, we want to deliver a new release that accomplishes, the things which Steve described in more detail. We want to establish a roadmap and a release schedule, so that includes not only providing a target timeline for EE10 release, but establishing a technology direction, standards around backward compatibility, and a release model that can be used to organize development efforts, and that provides a mechanism for delivering innovation in the technology going forward. We want to grow the developer community, as I mentioned, not only from the perspective of contributors to the technology itself, but from the perspective of users of the technology, and not only the implementations that are being done at the Jakarta EE Working Group, but engagement with creation and delivery of the specification projects that drive the technology forward. We will establish programs for engaging with developers through user groups, through through evangelizing the technology and working with evangelist communities. We want to define programs to engage people from the users groups with specification projects, and essentially promote through blogs and events. Also, we want to proactively work with vendors and producers of tooling, which is important for developing, testing, managing Jakarta EE applications. So we're going to actively invest in this as part of our overall plan. We will also set a target for increasing the membership of the working group, and we intend to define targets and encourage each of the members of the working group to reach out and help with recruitment to build the membership of the working group itself so that we can grow the community. And we have a large set of activities, including activities like this one, to build awareness and engage with the community through events like live stream, tech talks, ongoing blogs, developer surveys, videos, sponsorship of conferences, notifications through mailing lists, and so on. So these are a more detailed description of activities that we will undertake to achieve our strategic goals. And that was a set of activities that the steering group agreed to. And then we took a look at our budget and allocated it to specific, to fund specific areas. Our budget is listed here. You can see in the 2020 column is our total revenue. So these are the revenues of the working group from member contributions. And that total is $1.3 million. And so that's the revenue, and the expenses are the way that funding is allocated. And so a significant portion of that is allocated to overall management of the Jakarta EE program itself, organizing events like this, having a developer advocate who can attend conferences and events and evangelize the technology. Marketing people to actually create, promote, monitor, measure the success of our marketing activities. Technical writers to develop content. We have a significant amount of infrastructure, which requires various DevOps tools and maintenance of those tools and maintenance of the overall dev infrastructure. So we're allocating resources to that. And we're also allocating resources to actually managing the specification process. For those of you who have been involved in actually creating the initial Jakarta EE8 specification, there's a process that needs to be managed, that needs to be executed. And it requires active management coordination, and it's an activity we need to fund. So that's the funding we have provided to the Eclipse Foundation for headcount that comes from the Eclipse Foundation to do management of all these things. In addition, we are funding a number of programs. The most significant is marketing, which I'll come back to in a moment, but we funded $285,000 for marketing activities, marketing programs in the coming year. The steering committee has also reserved a contingency fund in the event we need rapid, purchase of specific tools or increasing licenses, fees in certain areas, or other contingencies, whatever might be required to actually facilitate our primary strategic objectives, including things like delivering EE9. So we've held back some funding to enable us to respond to events and needs as they occur. There's also legal fee contingency. There's complicated patents, IP licensing flows involved in a specification process and in the technology area we're managing. And we want to fund a certain amount of legal fees to deal with getting legal analysis, legal opinions on various issues as they come up. We think we're reasonably covered from the perspective of the hardware infrastructure that is set up for our builds and repositories and so on. So the total amount of spend on those programs is about $388,000. In addition to the headcount spending at the Eclipse Foundation of $760K and that program spend, the Eclipse Foundation generally invests a significant amount of time on administration of all of the work surrounding Jakarta EE, providing advice, meeting with analysts, orchestrating evolution of the working group structures, resolving major issues around strategic direction and funding. There's a significant amount of effort involved in defining a process that orchestrates work among all the vendors involved here. And so this allocation, this general administrative allocation, is intended to cover the administrative expenses that essentially get applied to this working group by the Eclipse Foundation. And those expenses total up to $1.3 million, which equals our incoming revenues. So these are the general areas in which the working group is investing in 2020. I mentioned the marketing budget. The marketing committee, which is one of the working committees in the Jakarta EE working group, has analyzed, the requirements and that are associated with meeting the strategic goals of the working group, and has translated each of the strategic goals for the foundation into corresponding goals from a marketing perspective. And the marketing budget that we've allocated to the marketing committee will be directed towards marketing activities that are in support of the major strategic goals that the working group has established. And so here are 5 of the major strategic goals and some of the marketing activities that will be undertaken in support of those goals. And they include, building community engagement, working with tooling vendors, and goals that are aligned with the overall goals of the working group. So that is the budget that we have established for the coming year. Our intention is that we will take the strategic goals and the plan we have put together for achieving these goals and define quarterly milestones or outcomes or targets associated with those, and monitor those at the steering committee to ensure that we're pursuing the goals we've set for ourselves successfully. My hope is that the steering committee, which from the initial formation of the working group has been very involved in operational day-to-day activities as a matter of necessity to bootstrap the activity, will move to more of an oversight role, and that we can move to enabling the individual projects and the other committees in the working group to actually drive many of the implementation activities that are required to make Jakarta EE successful. So we'll monitor our progress against this plan and adjust as required during the course of the year. So that's a summary of our plan and how we're allocating our resources next year. That concludes my slides. Are there any questions or comments?